My name is Douglas, and at 32 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. Working as a construction manager in Chicago had allowed me to save $75,000 for my dream home, until I checked my account one Sunday morning and found it empty. My sister Natalie had stolen every penny for her wedding. When I confronted her, she just laughed in my face. "What are you going to do? Sue your own sister?" She had no idea I had discovered something about her perfect fiancé, Richard, that would change everything. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you all are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more real-life stories like this one. Trust me, you will want to stick around for how this ends. How, growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, Natalie and I shared what I thought was an unbreakable bond. 4 years my junior, she was always following me around, wanting to do everything her big brother did. I taught her how to ride a bike, helped her with math homework, and chased away the neighborhood kids who tried to pull her pigtails. Our home was full of laughter and warmth until I turned 15. The day my parents sat us down to announce their divorce remains vivid in my memory. Mom crying silently while Dad explained in a detached voice that they had grown apart. Natalie, only 11 at the time, climbed onto my lap and buried her face in my shoulder. That night, as I heard her sobbing through our shared bedroom wall, I made a promise to myself that I would always protect her. The divorce hit our family finances hard. Dad moved to California for a new job, and while he sent child support, it was barely enough. Mom took on 2 jobs, working as an administrative assistant during the day and waitressing at night. I stepped up, working construction on weekends and during summer breaks to help put food on the table. When college came around, I continued working nearly full-time while attending classes, sending money home whenever I could. Those years taught me the value of hard work and saving. After graduating with my engineering degree, I landed a job as a construction manager. The pay was good, and I had a plan. I would save every extra dollar for a down payment on a house, something with a yard, and maybe a garage, where I could work on old cars. My secret passion. For 8 years, I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with roommates, driving an old truck, and rarely taking vacations. Every time I transferred money to my savings account, I would picture the house that would someday be mine. Meanwhile, Natalie seemed to be changing. The sweet, thoughtful girl who once made me handmade birthday cards had transformed into someone I barely recognized. After graduating from college with a marketing degree, she landed a job at a prestigious firm in downtown Chicago. Suddenly, her conversations revolved around designer labels, exclusive restaurants, and the social elite she was desperate to impress. I brushed it off as a phase, assuming she was just enjoying her success. Then came Richard Bennett. Tall, with perfectly styled hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He emerged from the crowd at a charity gala Natalie had been invited to. Through work, according to her breathless recounting, he had walked straight up to her, handed her a glass of champagne, and said, "I have been waiting all night to meet the most beautiful woman in the room." It sounded like a line from a cheesy movie to me, but Natalie was enchanted. From the moment I met Richard at a dinner Natalie arranged, something felt off. He claimed to be a financial consultant with an impressive client list. Yet whenever I asked specific questions about his work, he redirected the conversation with vague answers about confidentiality agreements. His stories about his past seemed rehearsed, like he was performing rather than sharing. When I mentioned these observations to Natalie, she accused me of jealousy. "Just because you choose to live like a college student does not mean everyone has to, Douglas," she snapped. "Richard is successful and cultured. Maybe you could learn something from him." Her words stung, but I backed off. Perhaps I was being overprotective, or, worse, envious of her happiness. After all, my own love life was practically non-existent. With work consuming most of my time, the relationship moved at lightning speed. Within 6 months, Richard proposed with a diamond ring that must have cost more than my annual salary. Natalie called me, screaming with excitement, and I forced enthusiasm into my voice, while that uneasy feeling intensified in my gut. When I asked if she thought 6 months was rushing things, she dismissed my concern. When you know, Douglas. Not everything needs to be planned out over years. Like your boring life. I swallowed my hurt and congratulated her again. The wedding planning began immediately, and it was clear this would be no small affair. Natalie talked about renting a historic mansion, flying in flowers from South America, and hiring a chef who had appeared on television cooking shows. Our mother, swept up in Natalie's excitement, encouraged her extravagance. Your wedding day is once in a lifetime, sweetheart, Mom would say, while I silently calculated the growing costs. During a family dinner, I shared my own exciting news. After 8 long years of saving, I was finally ready to start looking for my dream house. I had appointments with real estate agents and had been pre-approved for a mortgage. That is great, Douglas, Natalie said dismissively, before immediately turning the conversation back to her wedding. The problem is the venue wants an additional $5,000 for the extended bar service, and Richard thinks we should have it. I noticed she always framed these expenses as what Richard thinks we should have, as if the extravagance was his idea. Yet, I had never seen him reach for his wallet. When the check arrived at restaurants, there was always an excuse. His credit card was having an issue, or he had forgotten his wallet in his other jacket. Somehow, I always ended up paying. As the wedding date approached, family tensions grew. Our modest mother, who had once clipped coupons and bought our clothes from thrift stores, was now arguing with the florist about the exact shade of pink peonies. Richard's parents remained mysteriously absent from the planning, with Richard explaining they were traveling extensively in Europe. When I asked for their contact information to introduce myself, he promised to provide it later but never did. By the time the wedding was 3 months away, I had found a perfect house. 3 bedrooms, a decent yard, and that garage I had dreamed about. I showed Natalie pictures on my phone during one of the rare moments when she was not discussing wedding details. It is nice, she said, glancing briefly at the images. But honestly, it is a bit small, and that neighborhood is not very impressive. Richard says, "Location is everything." "It is what I can afford," I replied, trying to hide my disappointment at her reaction. "And it is perfect for me." "Well, at least you will have somewhere to live," she said with a laugh, returning to her wedding binder. "Now, do you think I should go with the crystal or the silver candelabras for the reception tables?" I had no idea my simple house hunting would soon become irrelevant, as the foundation of my carefully planned future was about to crumble beneath me. That Sunday started like any other. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table to review my finances. As I did at the beginning of every month, I had a spreadsheet where I tracked every dollar, watching with satisfaction as my savings grew closer to my goal. With the house I wanted now under contract, I was planning to make the down payment that week. I logged into my bank account, expecting to confirm the $75,000 that represented 8 years of sacrifice and discipline. Instead, I blinked at the screen in disbelief. My balance read $126.42. My first thought was fraud. Someone had hacked my account. Heart pounding, I called the bank's emergency line. After confirming my identity, the representative pulled up my recent transactions. "Yes, I see the withdrawal," she said calmly. "It was processed on Friday for $74,873.58 to Wedding Wonderland Events. It appears to have been an authorized transfer, sir." "That is impossible," I sputtered. "I never authorized any such transfer." After more questions, the truth emerged like a nightmare. The transfer had been made using my online banking credentials from my home IP address during hours when I had been at work. Only one other person had access to my home, and knew my banking information. Natalie. Years earlier, when I was briefly deployed overseas with a construction company building infrastructure in a conflict zone, I had given Natalie emergency access to my accounts, just in case. I had told her, trusting her completely. I had never thought to revoke that access after returning. Why would I? She was my sister. Hands shaking, I grabbed my keys and drove to Natalie's apartment. The 20-minute drive felt like hours as scenarios played through my mind. There must be some mistake. Perhaps she had accidentally transferred the money while trying to check her own accounts. Maybe she had meant to move a smaller amount as a loan and entered the wrong number. But deep down, I knew. The exact amount to a wedding planning company was no accident. Natalie answered the door in her pajamas, coffee mug in hand, looking annoyed at the early visit. "Douglas? What are you doing here?" "It is not even 10 o'clock. I pushed past her into the kitchen, unable to contain myself. "My money, Natalie. My entire savings." "Why?" Her expression shifted from confusion to recognition, then surprisingly, to defiance. She set her mug down carefully before answering. "I needed it for the wedding. The final payments are due this week." The casual way she said it, as if discussing borrowing a sweater, made my blood boil. "You stole $75,000 from me. Money I was about to use for my house down payment. Money I spent 8 years saving." Natalie sighed, leaning against the counter. "I was going to tell you. Richard and I discussed it, and we will pay you back after the wedding. This is an investment in my future, Douglas. Richard has connections that will benefit our whole family." "You discussed stealing my money with your fiancé?" I was nearly shouting now. "Are you insane?" "I am calling the police." That was when she laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an apologetic one. A cold, dismissive laugh that made me feel like I was suddenly facing a stranger. "And tell them what? That your sister, who has had legal access to your accounts for years, borrowed money? What are you going to do? Sue your own sister? It is theft, Natalie. You know that. I never gave you permission." She waved her hand dismissively. No judge would see it that way. "Besides, do you really want to explain to everyone why you ruined my wedding? Mom would never forgive you." I stood there, speechless. This calculating person in front of me could not be the same sister I had protected and loved all my life. "I need that money back. Now. Today." My voice cracked with emotion. "Impossible. It is already paid to the vendors. Non-refundable deposits. Douglas." She picked up her coffee again. "You will get your money back. Eventually. Richard is expecting a huge bonus after the wedding. We will pay you back with interest." I left her apartment in a daze, making it to my car before the tears came. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles turned white, trying to process what had just happened. My sister had stolen my future and acted like she had done me a favor. My next stop was my parents' house. Surely they would see reason. My mother answered the door, already dressed for Sunday church. "Douglas, what a surprise. Come in, come in." I explained what had happened, expecting shock and support. Instead, my mother's face showed only mild concern. "Well, it is troubling she did not ask you first," Mom said, fidgeting with her pearl necklace. "But, sweetheart, it is her wedding, the most important day of her life." "Mom, she stole my house money," I said, my voice rising in disbelief. "Borrowed," she corrected. "And you can always save more money, Douglas. You are good at that. But Natalie only gets one wedding day, and Richard is such a catch. Coming from his background, certain standards are expected." I turned to my father, who had remained silent during the exchange. "Dad," he sighed heavily. "Your mother has a point, son. Family helps family. And Natalie said Richard will help you get an even better job after the wedding. Think of it As an investment, I left their house feeling completely alone. The two people who should have been outraged on my behalf had sided with the person who stole from me. It was as if I had entered some parallel universe where wrong was right and theft was acceptable. If it involved white dresses and flower arrangements, as a last resort, I consulted a lawyer the next day. The news was not good, given that you provided her access and never revoked it. And considering your familial relationship, this would be difficult to pursue criminally, the lawyer explained. A civil case might be possible, but it would be your word against hers regarding the intent of the access you granted her. So she just gets away with it? I asked, defeated. Family cases are complicated. Courts are reluctant to intervene in what they see as family disputes. My advice? Try to work it out privately. The legal route will be expensive, time-consuming, and may permanently damage your family relationships. I left the lawyer's office with no clear path forward. My house contract would fall through without the down payment. 8 years of sacrifice gone in an instant. And the worst part? My own sister thought it was perfectly justified. She had looked me in the eye and laughed at my distress. That night, I returned to my apartment and looked around at my sparse furnishings. The items I had denied myself to save for something better. All for nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Finalize the menu today. Wagyu beef for the main course. Richard insisted. You will love it. I turned off my phone and opened a beer, wondering how my life had spiraled so dramatically out of control in less than 24 hours. 3 days later, I found myself sitting at a bar downtown, nursing a whiskey and contemplating my limited options. The house I had wanted was now being shown to other potential buyers. My real estate agent had been sympathetic but firm, explaining that without the down payment, there was nothing to be done. I had considered loans, credit cards, even asking my boss for an advance, but nothing would come close to the amount I needed in time. Another round for me and my buddy here, said a loud voice to my right. A man in an expensive suit clapped another man on the back. We closed the Peterson deal. Richard is going to be furious he missed out. My ears perked up at the name. Richard was common enough, but something made me pay attention. Richard Bennett? I asked before I could stop myself. The men turned to look at me, surprised. No, Richard Calloway, the first man replied. You know a Richard Bennett? He is engaged to my sister, I said, taking a sip of my drink. Poor bastard. The second man laughed, then caught himself. Sorry, man. No offense to your sister. Just making a joke. I forced a smile. None taken. Though the name sounds familiar, the first man said, frowning slightly. Bennett. I think I met a Richard Bennett at the Hartford conference last year. Financial guy, right? Tall, perfect hair. Looks like he walked out of a men's magazine. That sounds like him, I confirmed, suddenly interested. Funny thing is, I thought his last name was Barlow, not Bennett. We exchanged cards, and I remember because I called the number later for some advice, and it was disconnected. He shrugged, probably just misremembering. Had a few too many at that event. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake what I had heard. Richard Barlow? Was it possible it was the same person? The physical description matched, and Richard had mentioned attending the Hartford conference. That night, fueled by whiskey and lingering anger, I began searching online. Richard Bennett yielded thousands of results, none matching my future brother-in-law. I tried Richard Barlow and found a LinkedIn profile that had been deleted, but was still cached. The profile picture was blurry, but showed a man with similar features to Richard. The employment history listed financial consulting work in Chicago, Phoenix, and Boston, with dates that overlapped suspiciously. I kept digging. Social media searches revealed nothing under Richard Bennett. But under Richard Barlow, I found an old Instagram account that had not been updated in 2 years. The photos showed Richard, unmistakably the same man. with his arm around a pretty blonde woman. Several pictures included 3 young children. The captions referred to family time and my beautiful wife, Madison. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the evidence of another life. One photo showed Richard and the woman standing in front of a house with a Welcome to Phoenix sign visible in the background. The timestamp was from 18 months ago, well within the time Richard claimed to have been living in Chicago. I needed more proof. This could all be explained away. Maybe he was divorced. Maybe it was an old relationship he had not mentioned. But the sick feeling in my stomach told me there was something more sinister at play. The next morning, I called in sick to work and contacted a private investigator. The cost would eat into my remaining savings. But I had to know the truth. I explained the situation, provided Richard's information, and asked for a comprehensive background check. I will need a few days. The investigator, a former police detective named Frank, told me, "These things take time if you want them done right." Those were the longest 3 days of my life. I avoided calls from my family, made excuses to miss a wedding planning dinner, and jumped every time my phone rang. Finally, Frank called with his findings. "You better sit down for this," he warned. According to Frank's investigation, Richard Bennett was indeed Richard Barlow. He was legally married to Madison Barlow in Phoenix, Arizona, with whom he had 3 children, aged 8, 6, and 4. He had never divorced her. Instead, he traveled frequently, telling his wife he was on business trips, while actually establishing relationships with other women. "This is not his first rodeo," Frank explained. "I found evidence of at least 2 other women he has done this to in the past 5 years. Patricia Simmons in Boston and Jennifer Wright in Atlanta. The pattern is the same. He presents himself as a wealthy bachelor, sweeps them off their feet with a whirlwind romance, proposes quickly, and pushes for an expensive wedding. Then what happens?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Then he disappears right after the wedding with whatever money he can get his hands on. Joint accounts emptied, credit cards maxed out, sometimes even second mortgages taken out. By the time the women realize what has happened, he is long gone. He uses different last names, but always keeps Richard as his first name. Probably so he does not slip up when someone calls for him. I felt physically ill. Has he ever actually gone through with a wedding? Twice that I could confirm. The third woman figured it out just before the ceremony. The weddings are part of the con. They legitimize him, make it easier to access funds, and provide a perfect getaway opportunity. The honeymoon is when he disappears. Have any of these women pressed charges? All of them. But he is good at covering his tracks, changes phones, creates false paper trails. By the time law enforcement gets involved, the trail is cold. Plus, it is hard to prove theft when someone willingly gives you access to their accounts, just like Natalie had done with mine. There is more, Frank continued. I found some outstanding warrants for him in Arizona for fraud and identity theft, unrelated to his marriage. Apparently, he has been running investment scams on the side. I thanked Frank and sat in stunned silence after hanging up. My sister was not just marrying a liar. She was marrying a criminal who planned to steal from her and disappear. And she had unknowingly helped him by stealing my money to fund the very wedding that was part of his con. The irony would have been almost funny if it were not so devastating. I now faced a moral dilemma. Should I go straight to Natalie with what I had learned? Or should I gather more evidence first? Given how she had responded to my accusations about the money, I worried she would dismiss my claims about Richard as jealousy or an attempt to sabotage her happiness. I decided to contact Madison Barlow directly. If anyone deserved to know what Richard was doing, it was his actual wife. Finding her contact information was easy. With the information Frank had provided, I drafted and redrafted an email several times before finally sending a simple message explaining who I was and asking for a phone call regarding her husband. I included my number, but not the details of what I had discovered. She called within an hour, armed with evidence and Madison's confirmation. I arranged to meet Natalie for coffee the next day. I arrived early, setting up my laptop with the files Frank had provided, including photos of Richard with Madison and their children, copies of their marriage certificate, and documentation of his previous cons. Natalie arrived 20 minutes late, already annoyed. This better be important, Douglas. I had to reschedule my cake tasting. It is important, I said, keeping my voice steady. It is about Richard. There are things you need to know. Her face immediately hardened. If this is another attempt to make me feel guilty about the money, you can save it. I told you. We will pay you back after the wedding. This is not about the money, I insisted, turning my laptop toward her. This is about who Richard really is. Before I could open the first file, Natalie slammed the laptop shut, nearly catching my fingers. Stop it. Just stop, she hissed. I know what this is. You cannot stand that I am happy. You have always tried to control my life, acting like you know what is best for me. Natalie, please, just look at the evidence, I pleaded. Richard is not who he says he is. He is already married. He has children. He has done this before to other women. You are pathetic, she spat. Making up lies because you are jealous. Richard warned me you might do something like this. My blood ran cold. He what? He said you seemed resentful of our happiness, of his success, that you might try to come between us when the wedding got closer. She stood up, gathering her purse. I did not want to believe him, but here you are, proving him right. Natalie, please. I reached for her arm, but she pulled away. I am going to say this once, Douglas. Either you support my wedding and act like a proper brother, or you are not welcome in my life anymore. No more investigations. No more accusations. Just be happy for me. Or stay away. She left without another word, leaving me sitting alone with my unopened evidence. Richard had anticipated this move. He had poisoned Natalie against me, preparing her to reject any information I might discover. It was clever, I had to admit. Evil, but clever. Changing tactics, I decided to confront Richard directly. I texted him, suggesting we meet for a drink to clear the air before the wedding. Surprisingly, he agreed, proposing a coffee shop downtown the following afternoon. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, which suited my purposes. Public places were safer for confrontations like this, and I had no idea how Richard might react. He arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably as always, with that practiced smile. Douglas, good to see you, he said, extending his hand as if we were old friends. Coffee? My treat. I will buy my own, I replied coldly. Once we were seated with our drinks, I wasted no time. I know who you are, Richard. Or should I call you Richard Barlow? His smile remained fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. I am not sure what you mean. I think you do. Madison sends her regards, by the way. The name of his wife finally cracked his composure. His smile disappeared, replaced by a calculating look. You have been busy. You are married with 3 kids in Phoenix. You have pulled this same scam on at least 2 other women. And now, you are targeting my sister. Richard leaned back, suddenly relaxed again. Interesting theory. Did you share it with Natalie? Yes, he smiled. And how did that go? I did not answer. Which was answer enough. Let me explain something to you, Douglas, Richard said, his voice low and controlled. No one will believe you. I have already told everyone that you are having some issues. Financial stress, jealousy, maybe even some mental health problems. Poor Douglas. So upset about his sister getting married that he is inventing wild stories. I have proof, I insisted. You have some photos and documents that can be explained away. Maybe I was married before. Maybe those children are from a previous relationship. Maybe that woman is stalking me. He shrugged. It is your word against mine. And right now, everyone, including your sister, thinks you are unstable. The police might be interested in those outstanding warrants in Arizona. I countered. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Be very careful, Douglas. If you pursue this, I promise you will regret it. Natalie will never forgive you for ruining her wedding. Your parents will take her side. You will lose your entire family. He stood up, adjusting his jacket. Think about it. Is that worth it? Over some money and suspicions? He dropped a $20 bill on the table. Coffee is on me. Consider it the first installment of paying you back. After Richard left, I sat there feeling completely outmaneuvered. He was right about one thing at least. My family had already chosen sides. When I tried to talk to my mother that evening, she interrupted me before I could even explain. Douglas, your father and I are concerned about you, she said, her voice dripping with rehearsed concern. Richard mentioned you have been making some accusations. He thinks you might be struggling with the idea of Natalie moving on with her life. Mom, he is lying to all of us. I tried to explain. He suggested you might benefit from talking to someone, a therapist. He even offered to pay for it. She patted my hand. There is no shame in getting help, sweetheart. It was surreal. Richard had completely turned my family against me, positioning himself as the concerned future in-law, while painting me as mentally unstable. Meanwhile, wedding planning continued at full speed, with the final budget exceeding $99,000, most of it funded by my stolen savings. I tried reaching out to Natalie one more time, but she refused to see me. Instead, she sent a text message. Richard told me you confronted him with your crazy theories. I cannot believe you would go this far. Stay away from him and me. When I replied that I had evidence, including his wife's contact information, she finally called me, her voice shaking with anger. You would not dare tell him, she hissed. You would not dare contact his family with your lies. They are not lies, Natalie. He is using you. You are trying to ruin my life because you are jealous and bitter. Well, it will not work. The wedding is happening in 3 weeks, and you are no longer invited. I was at rock bottom, isolated from my family, branded as unstable, and powerless to stop what was coming. I considered giving up, letting Natalie learn the hard way what kind of man Richard was. But I knew I could never forgive myself if I did nothing. Just as I was about to resign myself to defeat, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Madison Barlow. I have been thinking about our conversation, she wrote. I am not the only one Richard has done this to. There are others. We should talk. Together, maybe we can stop him. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Madison and I arranged a video call for that evening. When her face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how normal she looked. A pretty woman in her 30s with tired eyes and blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. In the background, I could hear children playing. Sorry about the noise, she said. Babysitters are expensive, and Richard has not sent child support in months. We exchanged our stories, and I learned that Madison had been married to Richard for 10 years. He had always traveled for work, sometimes being gone for weeks or months at a time. She had grown suspicious 2 years ago, when credit card statements showed purchases in cities he claimed not to be in. But he always had explanations. I found out about the other women by accident, she explained. His laptop synced to our family cloud account, and I saw emails from someone named Patricia, calling him honey, and discussing wedding plans. That was 18 months ago. Since then, Madison had been gathering evidence and working with the other women Richard had conned. She introduced me to Jessica and Tara via a group chat, and they joined our video call. Jessica, a marketing executive from Boston, had actually gone through with her wedding to Richard 3 years ago. He disappeared during our honeymoon in Bali, she explained. Told me he was going for a massage. and never came back. Emptied our joint accounts first. Of course. Nearly $200,000 gone. Tara from Atlanta had discovered the truth just days before her wedding. My brother hired a background check as a gift, she said with a bitter laugh. Best gift ever. In retrospect, Richard was gone by morning when I confronted him. Together, we formed an alliance. These women had been trying to bring Richard to justice for years, but individually, they had been unable to catch him. With my information about his current whereabouts and the upcoming wedding, we finally had a chance. We need to confront him publicly, Madison said. Somewhere he cannot run from, with witnesses. The rehearsal dinner, I suggested. It is in 2 weeks at the Palmer House. Everyone will be there, including all of Natalie's friends and family. We spent the next several days developing a detailed plan. I recruited my best friend Carlos, who worked for a local news station and had connections with Chicago media. While he could not promise coverage, he could ensure there would be witnesses beyond just family members who might try to cover up the scandal. Madison, Jessica, and Tara shared all their evidence with me, which I organized into irrefutable proof. Bank statements showing money transfers, marriage certificates, photos with timestamps, police reports from previous incidents, and even video testimonials from other victims we discovered through a support group for romantic fraud victims. Madison decided to fly to Chicago with her children. He should face his family, she said firmly. His real family. His children deserve to see who their father really is, even if it is painful. I had reservations about involving the children, but understood her decision. This was about more than just stopping a wedding. It was about finally holding Richard accountable for years of lies and theft. Carlos helped me arrange for hidden cameras at the rehearsal dinner venue. Just in case something goes wrong, he explained. We will need evidence of whatever happens. As the day approached, I found myself increasingly anxious. Was I doing the right thing? The public confrontation would devastate Natalie. She would be humiliated in front of everyone she knew. Was there another way? The night before the rehearsal dinner, I made one final attempt to warn her privately. I went to her apartment, knocking until she finally answered. What are you doing here? She demanded. I told you to stay away. Please, Natalie. Just 5 minutes. Just look at the evidence. If you still think I am lying after that, I will leave you alone forever. For a moment, I thought I saw hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of the sister I had known. But then, her expression hardened. You have always tried to control my life, she said, tears forming in her eyes. From the time we were kids, you have acted like you know what is best for me. Well, not this time. This is my choice, my happiness, even if it is all based on lies. I asked softly. Get out, she whispered, and do not come to the wedding. You are not welcome. As I drove home, I questioned my decision. Was I doing this for Natalie or for myself? Was it about justice or revenge for the theft of my savings? I spent a sleepless night wrestling with these questions. But by morning, I knew I had to go through with the plan. Whatever Richard's immediate con was, it would not be his last. He would continue hurting people, including his own children, unless someone stopped him. Carlos picked me up for the rehearsal dinner, noting my exhausted appearance. You look like hell, he observed. Did not sleep, I admitted. Still not sure this is the right thing to do. Sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing, he replied. Remember, this guy is a criminal. He has hurt a lot of people, and he will hurt your sister too if we do not stop him. With that sobering reminder, we headed to the Palmer House, where an elegant disaster was about to unfold. The Palmer House ballroom was transformed for the rehearsal dinner, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables adorned with white roses and silver candelabras. The wealthy and influential friends Richard claimed to have were in attendance, along with Natalie's colleagues and our extended family. I recognized almost no one from Richard's side, which now made perfect sense. My parents greeted me with surprised expressions when I arrived with Carlos. Douglas, "We did not think you would come," my mother said cautiously. "I would not miss it," I replied, scanning the room for Richard. He was at the center of attention, naturally, laughing with a group of men as if they were old friends. When he spotted me, his smile faltered momentarily before returning even broader than before. He excused himself and approached us. "Douglas, you decided to join us after all." He extended his hand. "I am glad we can put our differences aside for Natalie's sake." I ignored his hand. "Where is the bar?" Richard pointed across the room, seemingly relieved by my apparent surrender. "Open bar. Top shelf only." Of course, Carlos and I made our way to a table near the back of the room. From there, I texted Madison, who was waiting with Jessica and Tara in a hotel room upstairs. "He is here." Everything proceeding as planned. The dinner portion of the evening went smoothly. I ate little, my stomach too knotted with anxiety to manage more than a few bites. Natalie, seated at the head table with Richard, kept glancing in my direction with a mixture of suspicion and hope. Perhaps she thought my presence meant I had accepted her relationship. After dinner came the speeches. Richard's best man, a man I had never seen before, gave a generic toast about friendship and love that could have applied to anyone. My parents spoke next, welcoming Richard to the family, with emotional words that made me cringe knowing what was to come. Then Richard himself stood up, champagne flute in hand. The room quieted as he began to speak. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "Tomorrow, I will marry the most beautiful, intelligent woman I have ever known." He turned to Natalie, who gazed up at him adoringly. "Natalie, from the moment I saw you, I knew you were special. You deserve everything life has to offer, and I promise to give you the world." The room erupted in appreciative murmurs and awes. I glanced at my watch, giving Carlos a slight nod. It was time. I stood up, deliberately knocking over my water glass to draw attention. "I would like to make a toast as well," I called out. Louder than necessary, Richard's face tightened, but he maintained his smile. "Of course. The brother of the bride. Everyone, please welcome Douglas." I walked to the center of the room, noticing Natalie's panicked expression. She knew me well enough to sense something was coming. For those who do not know me, I am Douglas, Natalie's brother. I have known her all her life, watched her grow from a pigtailed little girl to the woman she is today. I paused, making eye contact with Richard, and, because I love her, I cannot stand by and watch her marry a man who is not who he claims to be. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Richard's smile was frozen in place, his eyes darting toward the exits. "Douglas, that is enough," my father called out, starting to rise from his seat. "No, Dad. It is not enough. Not nearly." I nodded to Carlos, who slipped out of the room. Richard Bennett is not his real name. He is Richard Barlow, and he is already married. Richard stepped forward, his charm shifting to damage control. "Everyone, please excuse my future brother-in-law. As some of you know, he has been having some difficulties lately." "The only difficulty I have been having," I replied loudly, "is discovering that my sister is about to marry a con man who has done this before." Natalie stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Douglas, stop this right now." At that moment, Carlos returned, holding the door open. Madison walked in, holding the hands of two children, with a third walking just behind them. The room fell completely silent. Richard's face drained of color. For once, the smooth talker had no words. "Hello, Richard," Madison said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It has been a while." Natalie looked between Richard and Madison, confusion giving way to dawning horror. "What is this? Who are they?" "I am Madison Barlow," she replied. "Richard's wife. These are his children, Ethan Sophie, and Lily. The oldest boy stared at Richard with a mixture of hurt and anger that no child should ever have to feel. "Dad?" Richard finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous. This is some setup my future brother-in-law has arranged because he is jealous of our happiness." I stepped forward with my laptop. "I have evidence. Marriage certificates, bank records showing money transferred from previous victims, police reports, and statements from 2 other women Richard has conned." On cue, Jessica and Tara entered the room, taking positions on either side of Madison. "We all have the same story," Jessica said, addressing the shocked crowd. "Whirlwind romance, quick engagement, expensive wedding. And then he disappears with everything we had." Richard suddenly lunged toward the nearest exit, knocking over the elaborate champagne tower in the process. Crystal glasses crashed to the floor as the golden liquid spilled across the marble. Carlos and I had anticipated this move and blocked his path. "You are not going anywhere," Carlos said firmly. Cornered, Richard's charming facade finally cracked completely. "Fine. You got me. What do you want? Money? I can get money. We want you to face what you have done," I said. "To all of these women. To your children. To Natalie." Natalie pushed through the crowd, her face streaked with tears. "Tell me it is not true," she begged Richard. "Tell me they are lying." Richard looked at her, calculating even now. "Baby, it is complicated. Yes, I was married, but I thought the divorce was finalized. These other women, they are just trying to extort money from me." "Stop lying," Madison interrupted. "We have been married for 10 years. There was never any divorce filing." "The children?" Natalie whispered. Richard said nothing. "What about the wedding money?" I asked, directing the question to Richard, but watching Natalie. "What were you planning to do with that?" Richard's silence was answer enough. "He has been transferring it," Jessica explained gently to Natalie. "We found evidence of offshore accounts he has set up. Once the wedding was over, he would have disappeared on your honeymoon, just like he did with me." Natalie turned to me, devastation in her eyes. "My money? Your money? Most of it is probably already gone," I said softly. The sound of police radios interrupted the scene. 2 uniformed officers entered the ballroom, followed by a detective. "Richard Barlow?" the detective called out. Richard's shoulders slumped in defeat. "You are under arrest for outstanding warrants in Arizona, for fraud, identity theft, and violation of parole." The detective nodded toward Madison. "Thank you for the tip, Mrs. Barlow." As the officers led Richard away in handcuffs, he made one last desperate plea. "Natalie, baby, do not believe them. I love you. I would never hurt you." Natalie turned away, collapsing into a nearby chair as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. The elegant rehearsal dinner had become a crime scene, with stunned guests whispering among themselves. I knelt beside my sister, unsure if she would accept my comfort after what had just happened. To my surprise, she threw her arms around me, sobbing against my shoulder, just as she had when we were children, and our parents announced their divorce. "I am so sorry," she cried. "I did not know. I really did not know." "I know," I said, holding her tightly. "Neither did I, at first." The detective approached us after Richard had been taken away. "We will need statements from both of you," he said. "And I should inform you that we have already frozen several accounts associated with Mr. Barlow. There was a significant amount of money being moved offshore, but we caught it in time. You may be able to recover some of it later, after the guests had gone home and only family remained." The detective confirmed that about $30,000 had been recovered. The rest had already been spent on wedding vendors or transferred beyond their reach. My parents, finally faced with the undeniable truth, were devastated. My mother kept repeating, "How could we have been so blind?" while my father sat in silence, the weight of his misjudgment evident in his slumped posture. As the night ended, I helped Natalie to her feet. "Let us get you home," I said gently. "I do not have a home anymore," she replied, her voice hollow. "The apartment was in Richard's name. I do not even know if it was really his." "Then you will stay with me," I said without hesitation. "We will figure this out together." Madison approached as we were leaving. "I am sorry it had to happen this way," she told Natalie. "Believe me, I know exactly how you feel right now." Natalie nodded, unable to speak. "Thank you," I said to Madison. "For everything. We finally stopped him," she replied. "That is what matters." As I drove my broken-hearted sister home that night, I realized that while justice had been served, the healing was just beginning. For all of us, the days following the rehearsal dinner disaster were a blur of police statements, vendor cancellations, and difficult conversations. Natalie moved into my spare bedroom, bringing only a suitcase of clothes and personal items. Everything else remained in the apartment she had shared with Richard, which we later learned was rented under a false identity. At first, Natalie was inconsolable, alternating between crying jags and periods of angry silence. She refused to speak to our parents, blaming them for encouraging the relationship despite my concerns. But her anger toward me was even more pronounced. "You could have told me privately," she said one evening, a week after the events at the Palmer house. "You did not have to humiliate me in front of everyone I know. I tried to tell you privately, multiple times," I reminded her gently. "You refused to listen." She had no response to that. We both knew it was true. The police investigation revealed the full extent of Richard's crimes. Not only had he conned multiple women, but he had also been running investment scams through his fictitious financial consulting business. The detective assigned to the case estimated he had stolen over $1 million from various victims over the past decade. "You actually saved your sister from worse financial damage," the detective told me during a follow-up interview. "Based on the accounts we have frozen, he was planning to access her credit to take out loans in her name after the wedding. The $30,000 that had been recovered was returned to us, a fraction of what had been taken, but better than nothing. Natalie insisted I take all of it. It was your money to begin with," she said, sliding the check across the kitchen table to me. "We will split it," I insisted. $15,000 each. "You need to restart your life too." She shook her head. "I do not deserve any of it. Not after what I did." This became a pattern in the weeks that followed. Natalie punishing herself, refusing comfort or assistance, determined to suffer for her mistakes. She quit her marketing job, unable to face colleagues who had attended the rehearsal dinner. She stopped answering calls from friends. She was shutting down, retreating from the world. Concerned, I suggested therapy, expecting resistance. To my surprise, she agreed immediately. "I need to understand how I let this happen," she said. "How I became someone who could steal from her own brother." We found a family therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma, and both of us began attending sessions, sometimes individually, sometimes together. Our parents joined occasionally, the four of us working through years of dysfunctional patterns that had contributed to the current situation. "Natalie, you saw Douglas as controlling because he expressed concern," the therapist observed during one particularly difficult session. "And Douglas, you saw Natalie as irresponsible because she rejected your advice. You were both acting from old childhood dynamics that no longer serve you." It was hard to hear, but necessary. We had fallen into roles established during our parents' divorce, with me as the protector and Natalie as the protected. When she tried to break free from that dynamic, she had swung too far in the opposite direction, rejecting any input from me regardless of its merit. Meanwhile, I had to accept that my own behavior had not always been perfect. My need to control situations, born from trying to stabilize our family during crisis, sometimes came across as judgment. I had been right about Richard, but my approach had pushed Natalie further into his arms. As the weeks turned into months, Small changes began to appear. Natalie found a new job, started reconnecting with a few close friends who had stood by her, and even went on a date, though she described it as more terrifying than bungee jumping. More importantly, she began working extra shifts at a local coffee shop on weekends, depositing the money into an account labeled Douglas Repayment Fund. When I discovered this, I tried to tell her it was unnecessary. "You do not have to do this," I said. "The money is not important. It is to me," she insisted. "Not just because it was your house fund, but because of what it represents. I betrayed your trust, Douglas. I need to make that right." I understood then that this was not just about money, it was about redemption and rebuilding trust. So, I accepted her contributions. Watching as the account slowly grew, my own life was changing too. The house I had wanted was long gone, but I had started saving again, albeit with a more conservative timeline. I had learned that some dreams could wait, that flexibility was sometimes more valuable than rigid plans. The first holiday after everything happened was Thanksgiving. Always a big event in our family. None of us knew quite how to handle it, given the tension and unresolved feelings still simmering beneath the surface. In the end, we decided on a small gathering at my apartment. Just the four of us. It was awkward at first, with stilted conversation and long silences. But as the evening progressed, something shifted. My father, who had barely spoken about his role in enabling Richard, finally addressed it. "I failed you both," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have listened to Douglas's concerns. I should have asked more questions. We all failed each other," my mother added. "We got caught up in appearances and forgot what really matters." By the end of the night, we were not exactly healed, but we had taken a step forward. Natalie even laughed at one of my terrible jokes, a sound I had not heard in months. I learned important lessons through this ordeal. That forgiveness does not mean forgetting or enabling harmful behavior. That protecting someone sometimes means letting them make their own mistakes. That family bonds can be bent to the breaking point but still survive. Natalie was learning too. About setting boundaries, questioning too perfect narratives, and trusting her instincts rather than wishful thinking. 8 months after the rehearsal dinner, Richard's case finally went to trial. Madison, Jessica, Tara, Natalie, and I all testified. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to story after story of Richard's deceptions, I felt a strange sense of community with these other victims. We had all been fooled by the same man, all suffered losses, but we had also all survived. When the judge sentenced Richard to 12 years for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny, Madison turned to our little group and whispered, "Now we can really move on." The day after the sentencing, Natalie came to my apartment with an envelope. Inside was a check for $1,000, along with a handwritten note. "First official repayment. Many more to come. Thank you for saving me, even when I did not want to be saved. Love, Nat." It was a small amount compared to what had been taken, but its symbolic importance was immeasurable. As I looked at my sister, I saw glimpses of the person she had been before Richard, before the materialistic phase, before all the pain. But I also saw someone new, someone stronger and more self-aware. "I am proud of you," I told her, and meant it. "I am trying to be someone I can be proud of too," she replied. The road ahead would still be long. Trust, once broken, does not mend overnight. But we were moving forward, one step at a time, with clearer eyes and more honest hearts. What I learned through all of this is that sometimes protecting those we love means making the hardest choices. That truth, even when painful, is always better than comfortable lies. And that real family stays through the darkest moments, not with blind loyalty, but with tough love and unwavering support. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love, even if it meant risking your relationship with them? Share your experiences in the comments below. And If you found value in my story, please like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons. Do not forget to hit that share button if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most important growth.